Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching or listening. This is our first episode of a series called Reach Out. I'm Yochai Elam, founder of Touchbase, which tackles loneliness by empowering, nudging people to reach out to each other, to loved ones. And today I'm excited to host Dr. Sena Aydin Bergfalk, a UX CX researcher and strategist, and a cultural anthropologist by training. Thanks for joining, Sena.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks. So, Sarah, before we jump into today's topic, loneliness and technology, I'd love to hear more about you. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit how loneliness became part of your professional journey?
Of course. I would say that I wear two main hats that you just mentioned. On the one hand, I'm a CX UX researcher. So I provide user and customer insights to develop products or services or brands. And I'm also trained as a cultural anthropologist with a subdisciplinary specialty in urban anthropology, which is my second hat. So, under that hat, I examine the dynamics between urban design and municipal politics. And my work has been focused on Barcelona and the effects of the city's municipal policies on the city's peripheral communities. And I guess in the industry, urban design is usually associated with service design. But I
Mm,
think, especially in the case of touristic cities like Barcelona, we are talking about the commercialization of a city as a product that, in the case of Barcelona, has been branded in very ethical terms, such as sustainable, I don't know, ecological, feminist, or participative, or what you have. So my academic work kind of questioned to what extent this ethical vision included the city's peripheries and the peripheral residents.
mm,
Um, and asking this question, I think, exposes one to the profound impact that social exclusion and lack of resources can have on individuals and communities' well-being. And that
mm.
said, I haven't specifically researched loneliness in academic or industry settings, but I also see it emerging as a recurrent theme in whatever I do, not just as an
Mm.
emotional state, but also as a consequence of systemic issues and social injustices. But also, I think, as a byproduct of the high speed, high rhythm urban lives that we live.
I see. Yeah, as we're recording this, Barcelona is undergoing protests about tourism, and it's all related. So, well, very interesting background. Undoubtedly, urban life is a significant aspect. Uh, how does loneliness interact with other social issues such as mental health, aging, urbanization?
Um, I would say that it is deeply interconnected with all these social issues that you just mentioned because
Mm,
it is a social state or an emotion, which is completely different than, for example, being alone, which simply means you're just not in physical proximity to other people. Um, so rapid urbanization has, I think, created environments and everyday realities for us in which we live really close to other people and regularly find ourselves in crowds, but feel socially lost or disconnected, I guess, due to the fast pace of life. And we have trouble forging meaningful social connections. And I think that being the case, like you said, loneliness can worsen mental health conditions like depression or anxiety or social anxiety. It can particularly affect older adults facing social isolation. And I believe it's one of the most pressing but still somewhat invisible social problems in Europe, which is leading the world in the proportion of elderly population nowadays.
yeah, indeed, it's a growing issue, and you studied the city here, and you've worked with policymakers. Uh, what do you think are the most important steps society should take to address the root causes of loneliness?
So in terms of, I think, policy making or thinking it in lines with policy making. I mean, of course, an immediate answer would be, boosting community building initiatives like community centers, public spaces, or increasing accessible and affordable mental health services. But I think we also should realize that these are not simply policy interventions on paper. Of course, they look good on paper, but at the same time, they're also budget choices that most policymakers are not willing to make or prioritize. But I think we also have to complicate this even further, and I would like to offer maybe two more thoughts on that. First is kind of a fallacy that I see both in policymaking but also in product development, which is that we believe that if we have the right tools, those right tools will automatically yield the desired results. So, for example, in the case of urban policy, I don't know, opening a community center doesn't automatically make loneliness disappear or forge meaningful connections in and of itself. And I've seen many municipal community building initiatives along these lines fail in Barcelona time and again during my research. And I believe that the reason for that is a kind of lack of concern about the end users and their needs, which are never really independent of their social contexts, which kind of brings me to my second thought, which is that, the root causes of loneliness, for example, that a young person can experience might be entirely different than those that cause loneliness for an elderly person. Or, similarly, a peripheral working class resident of Barcelona might experience loneliness differently than, say, a more relatively well-off expat living in Poblenou. And even the ways in which these people define loneliness might be completely distinct from each other. So I think, unfortunately, there is not a one-size-fits-all type of solution, neither in product nor in policymaking. But whatever solution we devise must be flexible and adaptable enough to diverse contexts and diverse people.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's in product it doesn't work. You build it and they will come. You need to think
Yeah.
about end users and how they live their lives outside the product and outside the community center in this case. From an anthropological perspective, how have community and social interaction evolved in recent years?
I guess that at least in recent years or lately, we have been living, I think, in a total paradox because thanks to technological advances, we're able to participate in global communities and have social interactions that are far-reaching than our immediate physical circle. But then at the same time, you have never felt this lonely and overwhelmed at once. So maybe, like, to put it in a different way, it's like we gained an unprecedented level of breadth of interaction thanks to technology, but then it came at the cost of losing depth of connection. And it is to the point that, for example, there's something that is called social media detox now, which we all understand what it means. It's like the need to turn to face or one-to-one interactions. I mean, this in and of itself is kind of indicative of this paradox that we have.
Yeah, can't. It's a bit sometimes contradictory, and yeah, what would you say are the biggest advantages and disadvantages of using technology?
I guess, like I said, it has kind of a dual nature. I mean, it's like I don't want to throw it out the window or just limit it to social media when we talk about technology. And also, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm against social media, and like I'm an active user of most social media platforms. But I think we have to take it for what it is, meaning it mainly allows us to connect to others through consuming impersonal public content, and it is at the mercy of algorithms more than anything. And this can lead to superficial connections. It can lead to cyberbullying. It can lead to unrealistic social comparisons between us and the lives of others, which then can aggravate the sense of loneliness. But then it can also have the opposite effect. So I don't know. I'm like thinking of, for example, the Me Too movement and how it addressed the loneliness that many women felt in the face of sexual harassment. Or if I were to give a personal example, I am a runner and I like running alone. I don't like running with people. But at the same time, seeing other people's running activities on different social media platforms designed for that, it kind of makes me feel like I'm part of an invisible community, and it actually motivates me to run better and
Mm,
more. So there's also that. But then I think besides social media, we should also value the power of technology in connecting people across distances. So, for example, now I can make an overseas call and talk to my parents with the same ease that I can just call my friend down the street, or I can monitor my grandmother's health from miles away. So, there are also other things that were unthinkable a few years ago, which is that, for example, we're now able to reach support networks or access resources like online therapy, for instance. So I feel like it is really hard to make a cost benefit analysis when it
mm.
comes to advantages and disadvantages of using technology to alleviate loneliness. I think it's a very kind of case by case situation.
Yeah, I always find that technology makes things accessible, but it depends. I mean, the best usage depends on how we use it. I mean, to get the benefits.
Yeah.
How can technology be designed to better address the needs of those experiencing loneliness?
Um, that is also a very hard question.
Yes.
So like earlier I talked about this concept of social media detox, right? And this increasing need to turn to more personal and personalized connections in a way. So if I were to say something, I think it would be that like the next technological move is to go beyond just simply facilitating any communication, but then focus on strengthening and easing more the personal types of communication between people. That would be, I think, my answer.
Oh yeah. Well, sounds good. So you and I met in an in-person event. We both run, but we didn't meet running. And I go to conferences, I go to meetups, I see a growing desire for these in-person events, people seeing each other physically. But there's still tons of communities which strive online. How effective are these virtual communities in providing genuine social connections compared to face-to-face interactions?
I think virtual communities and social media can provide genuine social connections. So it's not like they can't at all, even though it's rare. And it is especially, I think, the case for individuals who might be geographically isolated, who might be facing social anxieties, etc. But at the same time, I don't think that they're a direct substitute for face-to-face interactions, which I mean, the face-to-face interaction has the power to offer much richer, I don't know, nonverbal, emotional, and sensory cues that we can only experience in the shared presence of others. So, I mean, we even experience that. So we all have the first-hand experience of the difference between the in-person and the virtual during the pandemic. That's exactly what happened. And the difference between the in-person and virtual socializing, it's, I don't know, it's hard to kind of put it in words, but at the same time, it's something that most of us will say, "Oh yeah, you know, I know what you mean," in response, because
Hmm.
we all kind of do. We all, it's more like we sense it. So I guess we are social animals after all, and I think in that our bodies are one of the fundamental engines of our sociality, which can never be, I think, fully replaced or mediated by machines. So there will always be something that will lack in that. And this is my anthropologist response, I think.
Yeah, yeah. We as animals, we haven't evolved as fast as technology,
Mm.
I guess. Okay, we're nearing the finish line, and I'd like to end perhaps on a higher note. What gives you hope and optimism about our ability to combat the loneliness epidemic?
Um, let's see. I guess I'll respond more like a social scientist to this question. And I would say that, I mean, I believe, like probably many other social sciences, that there is a power in naming things.
Mm,
And if I were to digress and give an example, so I mean, we all know what PTSD is. It's post-traumatic stress disorder, and as a term, it was coined in the 70s, or as a condition. But then this didn't mean that people didn't suffer from the symptoms of PTSD prior to 1970s, but it's just that giving it a name made it easier to address its effects.
mm,
So this is not going as far to suggest that naming creates the thing named, but then at the same time, it certainly does give it a public existence and makes it visible. So the mere fact that you and I are now talking about loneliness as a thing, whether it's a problem, condition, or a symptom, or a state, it is indicative of the fact that there is a growing awareness and visibility of loneliness as an issue, as a public health issue that can no longer remain receded to the background in our daily social lives or in our interactions with technology, right? So I think this gives me the fundamental hope in that we will be able to combat it because we're able to name it and see it much clearly now.
yeah. So even this conversation is a contribution to.
I think so.
Um, okay, that's nice. Okay, thanks, Sena, for joining today. That was fascinating. Really learned lots of new stuff. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap it up?
Um, I would just say let's not lose hope. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Most welcome. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us today. Thanks, Sena. Follow Touchbase on social media we mentioned here and on gettouchbase.com. Thank you very much.